So what are you saying, that Abbott lowballed his measurements to help a teen get the abortion that she wants?
Maybe.
Well, then you've got two choices. You can go with Abbott's measurements, or you can redo your measurements, go back in and pick an angle that shows 11 weeks or less.
Please tell me you're joking.
You were ready to roll up your sleeves and arm wrestle the ethics committee a couple hours ago to override Mr. Spencer's children. What changed?
Apples and oranges. There was a clear, bright line that Mr. Spencer was never going to make it. Falsifying medical records for Christy is flat out illegal.
She's 17. She deserves a life.
Of course she does. But I will not jeopardize my future in the process.
You'll be fine.
Someone finds out I falsified medical records, I'll get booted from the residency program. You've got tenure. Worst case, you have to take a job in Youngstown. The risks are not the same for you as they are for me.
You're right. I'll do it.
Hello all, welcome back to What's On Tonight, a podcast with elaborate, quirky, and unpredictable conversations about TV, movies, and more. I'm Becky.
And I'm Mandy.
Tonight we are covering the Pitt Season 1, Episode 5, titled 11 a.m. Please note this is a spoiler-filled podcast, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, no biggie, just hop off and come back and check us out once you finished. This episode was written by Simran Badwan, I hope I did not butcher that name, and directed by John Cameron. So Mandy, what is this synopsis for this one?
Both Santos and Collins deal with their own moral and legal quandaries. Samira's careful approach earns praise from patients and reproach from Robbie. Javadi unintentionally upends McKay's attempts to help an unhoused patient.
The first impressions of the episode. I thought this was probably one of the better ones. I know there's only been 5, but I think this was one of the better ones of the season so far. I like the way Robbie wasn't the central focus. He was still there, still present, still in and out doing his thing. But the way the writers and directors, it's just such a ginormous cast. And the way they handled this episode where we got to a bit of a deeper dive into the doctors and the interns that surround Dr. Robbie, I thought it was really good. I give it 5 leg wound debridements out of 5.
Becky, my first note on my page here is leg injury - Becky, I hate you. And it's spelled H-A-H and an 8 and a U, like Prince would spell it, just so that you know that I am very serious. That was disgusting.
It was.
When it started spurting blood, first of all, it looked like a pimple, which we've already discussed. I don't care for. Then the blood started spurting out. Blech. However, overall, I really enjoyed it. It was another really good episode. I liked how you got more time to really go into the medical things that were going on with the people around you. I liked that you did learn a little bit more about the thinking of some of the people and got a little bit more, their characters got a little bit more fleshed out, the doctors and the interns. It's a little different. I mean, it was kind of, I don't know, I want to say less hectic maybe this time.
It did feel a lot less hectic. I hate to say calm because nothing in this show is really calm, but it did seem like they slowed down.
Maybe a little lull in between the chaos.
Yeah. You had time for doctors to talk to each other.
Right. And patients.
Got a chance to learn a little bit more about them outside of just being when they're taking care of a patient.
Right. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It moved things along quite nicely. Some more stellar acting, a lot of really good choices made by the actors. I like the writing. Good episode.
Yeah. So we start with where we left off as usual with the seizure patient. I thought there was a very interesting dynamic between Langdon and Santos in this one. I think back to what Mohan said to her last week that I forget, aggressive is something. Her face the entire time, it's like she thinks she knows it all. And to argue with a resident in front of the patient, who obviously wasn't very aware. But then when Dr. Robbie comes in and she like doubles down, and then going after to Dana about the medicine vial, to what's his name, Donahue, about going over a resident's head. It's like she's so cocky and sure of herself that she absolutely cannot admit that that whole vial thing might have been her fault. And then she did something wrong and surgery lady wasn't there to save her. So I really didn't like her in this episode.
So let's go back a little bit. This is Santos. Santos is Trinity's last name?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I'm doing better at keeping track of the cast of thousands here and what everybody's name is, but I'm still a little bit struggling, so bear with me. I thought Santos was that surgeon that's obviously got the hots for her. What is that chick's name?
I just call her surgeon lady because she still
Garcia?
gets on my nerves. Maybe.
I think she's Garcia.
That's possible.
Anyway, I want to talk about both of them and their dynamic. I agree with you, Miss Trinity, girl. But here's what I noticed about that is how incredibly awful. Like, we have talked a couple of times about one of the things that I think this show does is kind of try to create nuance in their characters and show that nobody's really a saint, but nobody is really a demon either. I'm going to reserve judgment on that because I can't think of any justification for the way that surgeon lady acts except sheer arrogance, that she comes in there, she does not see or care about the patient. All she cares about is coming in and showing her superiority. That's all they've given us so far. Like the things that she has said, unlike Trinity, who I give some grace to because she is young and she's an intern and she's learning, and I also believe is being groomed by this lady, judging by the hints that we're getting, that woman just seems to be a sociopath, just a flat up sociopath, which again, I go back and forth a little bit. Like before this episode, I was tending to try to give her some grace too, because I do believe in the real world context, surgeons tend to be less emotional and more clinical because of just the nature of what you have to do. It kind of attracts those type of people, and you don't want them especially overcome with emotion in very, very serious times when they need the steadiest of hands and brains. That being said, the things that she said in this episode and the way that Trinity seems to pick up on her vibe, I think that is what is, whatever their dynamic is, whether they're girlfriends, whether they're sisters, cousins, just good friends, whatever that secret relationship is that those two have, I think that's going to be the key to understanding why Trinity cannot be wrong. And I agree with you. Like, that was so cowardly of her, the way that she just was looking for any excuse to not make this her fault. And I hope that she's going to get over that and see the light before she ends up killing somebody.
I hope so too. To start off the episode with her and having that small breakthrough last week where, she had good intentions, they were wrong. And then for her, I don't know. I would love to talk to this actress and get her thoughts on
what kind of instructions.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting conversation. But yeah, there's not much else I want to talk about with that particular storyline, unless there's anything else you want to add. I just wanted to note that Santos is falling lower and lower in my tolerance bucket.
She just keeps going up and down to me because it seems like there's some forward motion on her character arc and her learning a little bit of humility. And then you have something like this where it just goes all the way backwards. And again, I do think that we're going to learn that whatever her chip on her shoulder is, it has to do with that woman's influence. And I'm really burning now for us to get more information about that because...
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I don't think what she's doing is solely because of that woman's influence. They've known each other for 5 hours.
I don't know about that. Do we know that?
Well, if you go back and look at the first time they meet each other, they don't know each other. It's unless, of course, the show could be red herring us, I think that's just who she is. I think that woman adds to her cockiness by coddling her when she made that mistake and brushing it off and then, giving her the knife to do that one surgical procedure. I think there is some grooming there, but based on the interactions that we've seen, I don't think Santos's actions are because of that. I just think Trinity's kind of Trinity.
See, I feel like there's more to it. I think they're laying the groundwork for there being some prior relationship. Just it's been too obvious the way that she has blown off the things that she's done, and Trinity seems to go back and forth, and all of her worst moments seem to come after some kind of interaction with that lady. I don't know. We'll see. Could be.
Yeah, I'm interested.
I am excited to see more about that. I will say I hate it, but it's keeping me engrossed in trying to figure out what's going on. So,
And that's the writers are doing their jobs. They are giving us such a diverse group of characters. And I don't mean diverse just in their physical sense, but diverse in the way they are. And it is, I will get to it a little bit later, but I have a note about the difference in King and Whitaker, who are both at the same level, and how different their personalities are. But they set it up just like any TV show. There's villains, there's, your love and hate relationships. And I have a strong dislike relationship for Trinity, but she does keep me interested and curious as to what she's a loose cannon. What's she going to do next? So
yeah, I'm invested in that storyline, and it better work out that one or both of those two get their comeuppance, or I'm going to riot.
Yeah, same.
But like you were saying, I would love to talk to that actress because I'm curious what prompts they gave her as they were recording. Like, does she know the overall arc of that character for, episode 1 to 15 before they started recording?
I'm curious how much information they gave her on this is what we expect from your character, and how much she's doing on her own. Does she know, do any of these characters know the end? I don't know, Wiley does, but do the rest of them know the end game?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would there's a lot of this cast I'd love to sit down and talk to, and hopefully one day we'll get the chance. But
right, Hill too. She's another one of those I'd like to know how much she knows about. Isn't that My Little Pony's name? Dr. Hill.
Dr. King.
No, Dr. King. Why do I want her to be Dr. Hill?
I don't know.
I think that's like the third time I've called her that.
It is. All right, so I thought the chemistry between Mohan and Whitaker, and then later Whitaker and Robbie with the two different patients, was amazing. I love the way they're pairing these residents up with their senior residents up with their residents. And I think this was a great pair. It is evident that Whitaker has got some confidence issues, as I think he brought them into the season, and then losing that patient, not being able to save him, he's obviously still thinks that that's his fault. And I love what we got out of this episode, Trinity and Surgeon Lady excluded, is the camaraderie that these doctors show each other, and how they support each other. For example, Whitaker is like, he's skittish to take any trauma patient because he doesn't think he should do something. And then Mohan is like, you got this, you can do this. And then he discovers that bleeder. And then Dr. King comes in and doesn't berate him, she to me looks like a senior resident, the way she handled Whitaker in that moment. And the patient brought some comedy, like, oh, he's a student? No. But it was never clarified that King was a student. But that's what I mean, the difference in the way they handle themselves and approach a patient. King is a lot more clinical, but the way she came in there with confidence and authority and presented herself as an actual doctor. And Whitaker is still a deer in headlights a lot of the time. But anyway, so I really liked how they supported each other in that, and how Whitaker, once the bleeding happened, he discovered this. He thought he did something wrong. And then when the patient is like, I want you to do it, and she supports her student. Nope, he's got this. And he did. It took him a second, but he got we watched Ricky Bobby last night, so he got his balls back for a minute. The surprise on his face when Dr. Robbie comes in and he's like, yeah, Whitaker saved this man's life. And the man's like, he did? And Whitaker's like, I did. It was just a cute thing. And I like that dynamic. And then again, when the tonsil guy comes in, he's right back to, it's an emergency. He's got a lot to learn with having confidence in a trauma situation. But the way Dr. Robbie rallied around him and didn't even let Whitaker finish his sentence that, I don't know if I can do this. He's like, yep, come on, just pats him on the shoulder and pulls him in and guides him and directs him. And then at the end of the scene when Whitaker's Dr. Robbie's like, it's your patient. You stay with him until anesthesiology gets there. The look of pride on his face because of these team members that support him, showing us more about him, but also about how the people around him recognize what a lot of these guys need and knows how to push and nudge them in a direction that works for them.
How many scrubs is he on now?
I think we're on 5 now.
One of the things we have to remember here is that patient that he lost, that was 2 hours ago.
No,
Wasn't it like 6 years ago?
I have it in chart notes, but I'll go ahead and say it. Every time they say an hour ago, I'm taken aback because it feels like it's been days.
Yeah, right. So I think that he is coming along remarkably quickly for someone who just lost their first patient a couple of hours ago. I do like watching the interplay with him. I thought that they initially gave him that abscess leg wound patient because his initial beef was that he thought that they were giving him the quote unquote easy job. What Mohan was saying is, hey, man, we got to take them as they come in, that this is something that's important that needs to be done too. And then one of the plot points was that this so-called easy job immediately became something more of an emergency.
Right.
As far as Dr. King goes, I think that it's situational. One of the things that I noticed, we've discussed in the past, do you think that that character is supposed to be on the spectrum?
I stand by that.
Well, I think we pretty definitively, like that part where where the patient told the joke and she just had
she didn't get it.
She didn't get it at all. I think that it's situational as far as her and Whitaker go when they're going to panic or when they're going to be flustered. She has had situations in the last couple of episodes where she's been just as ill prepared or flustered as Whitaker. But it seems like in these types of crisis situations,
she's calm.
So again, that is one of the things that we both enjoy about this series is seeing the different personalities and how they interact, not just all the time, but like with very specific medical situations. I think this show does a good job of showing how these are all pretty flawed people, but you need all of these different types of people to be able to competently give good health care because there are as many different types of medical emergencies as there are humans on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, she was very, very calm in that moment. And I did think it was very funny how she came in and just said, he's a student doctor. And I don't think she even registered why that would upset him.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to her the patient, and it didn't occur to her to volunteer that information about herself. And she just went about, solving the problem. And I thought that was very funny that he's sitting here freaking out and he thinks that like the day is saved because this real doctor is
here. And yeah. I'm like, she's just a student, or not just, but she's a student just like he is.
Yeah, it does make me a little nervous about going back. Like, I feel like I need to start asking for credentials when I go into the emergency room. Like, how old are you? What have you been up to? How long is this your first day? Did anybody die in the last 2 hours on your watch? These are questions I'm going to be asking going forward.
You're going to have your own questionnaire. Be like, we need you to fill out this paperwork. Be like, yep, going to need y'all to fill out this one.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to talking about Mohan. I really loved her in this episode. I thought we got to see some really interesting parts of her personality, and I can't wait to talk about her and the couple where the one wife has sickle cell.
Yeah, that's going to be in chart notes.
Well, that was poignant. I think that was my favorite.
The next little note I have is we get to meet Robbie's son, and he is adorable. I love how the staff, everybody knows him, and he's given hugs and whatnot. And I remember being younger and going into dad's office or going to see mom at work, and that's exactly what it was like. They embrace the kids like you're part of the family. I thought it was funny that they kept giving him condoms when Robbie goes, oh, hold on, let me give you this. And he's like, please don't give me a condom. And he's like, no, I'm going to give you some money. And then Noah Wiley's like, wait, you're having sex? And the kid is gone.
Yeah, I loved that part, that storyline. It hit home with me because I have a child that age, and he's just recently started dating his first girlfriend, and we've had all of those conversations. And I'm not going to abuse his privacy by getting into specific stories, but that
Thank you.
storyline, yeah, resonated very well with me. Oh, you don't act like you're above getting into. Becky, I would never say anything inappropriate.
Never.
Yeah. Anyway.
I don't know what you're talking about. You have a different Becky in mind.
Well,
No, I'm just thinking for Jackson.
oh yeah, no, I would never abuse his privacy that way. But let's not act like you haven't been making jokes for weeks as I've talked to you about that storyline going on in my life. Yeah.
You can't see me, but there is a halo floating over my head.
That's one of the things I loved about that, seeing them support that kid, is it did remind me of our friendship and a couple of other really good friends I have that do look out for my kid like they're his own, like he's their own, and would absolutely do that same thing for me to make sure that my kid was protected and safe and being smart. Oh God, when Princess was telling the story about the guy that looks like Dave DeMauro at Lollapalooza back in the 90s. Oh, I was like, you go, girl. We were in her blanket.
That girl was reliving that moment. It was happening right there.
It cracked my face.
Oh God, that was funny.
It did remind me of some stories I've told my kids where they're like, oh God, like you're a parent, you're not supposed to have a past or any of that stuff. They would just rather not know.
I do it to Connor on purpose because he's like, I don't want to know that. I'm like, well, now you do. How do you think y'all got here?
It's one of the pleasures we have of being a parent, for sure.
Yes.
I want to say though, what a difference between the way Jake was being treated as far as his sexual health throughout this episode, when you pair that with what was going on with the girl who was looking to get methylprednisone, the abortifacient. I think it was very telling, the difference between the pat on the back, and of course it was about sexual safety and take care of yourself and make sure you're protected and she's protected. Meanwhile, this girl is literally having to jump through hoops and potentially break the law to try to end her pregnancy. No contraceptive is 100% effective. And when there is something that happens, even if you're practicing safer sex, it's the woman, it's the girl
who bears the brunt of anything.
Yeah. I just saw a story this morning about a doctor in New York who is being charged with a felony along with the teenage girl that she mailed this methylprednisone, I'm going to say it wrong, methylprednisone to in Louisiana. Her mother, and the doctor are all being charged with a felony.
I saw somewhere, I should have paid attention, but I just glanced over it because that's kind of what I'm trying to do with news right now. But there is some state where they're trying to get a law passed that male ejaculation without the intent for pregnancy is a felony.
It's Mississippi, and they're doing that deliberately.
I know they're doing it deliberately, but I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. For sure.
You're going to put a woman to absolutely impossible winky fingers standards and how she can deal with her own body. Let's start regulating the man. Because it takes two to tango. A baby doesn't happen because a woman just decides, I want to be pregnant, and boo, she's pregnant. Somebody had to help her along in that process.
Well, and if you really want to get technical about it, Becky and I, we're both Christians. We are both highly identify with our Christian identity, and because of our love of Jesus Christ, the real Jesus Christ, that it is in the red words of your Bible, who preaches empathy, compassion, loyalty, love, tolerance. If we want to get real technical, though, the people that I feel like abuse the Bible in their quest to strip us of as many rights as we can, technically speaking, nowhere in the Bible does it say that abortion or the loss of a pregnancy is a sin. However, it does explicitly state that male masturbation is a sin. Spilling your seed outside the womb is a sin. So if we're going to use the Bible as a legal book now, let's go all the way. Let's make it fair.
And that's one thing I do want to say. You brought up us being Christians. Please understand, I have a hard time saying Christian nowadays because that term is being abused in the
Yeah.
way Mandy just said. And I want all of our listeners to know we are the Christians who believe in what Jesus came here to teach us. And that's what Mandy said: mercy, love, compassion, kindness. To not just sit here and judge each other and you're right and you're wrong. It's to embrace each other and love each other and carry each other, not this bullshit, period.
Yeah, I struggle a lot with my faith. I mean, there are times that I don't know that I even believe in an omniscient, omnipotent God. That being said, I love Jesus very much. And the reason that I love Jesus very much is that I went through, as I've talked about before, depression has just kind of been a lifelong thing with me. Sometimes are better, sometimes are worse, but the despair, like I remember in my early 20s when I was going through one of my longest and most difficult. It was the first time in my life. I don't want to hijack all this about religion, but I will say that it was the first time in my life, like when I was growing up, no matter what happened to me, no matter what was going on around me, something inside me, and on my better days when I'm feeling my faith more deeply, I am very grateful for this, but there was something inside me that I always felt like God was there. No matter how bad it got, no matter how terrible things were around me, I always felt like I had him looking out for me somewhere, somehow. And when I was late teens, early 20s, that was the first time I genuinely lost my faith completely. I could not feel God's presence at all, and it was miserable. But what I did through that is that I actually sat down and I read the Bible. And here's what cemented my love of, because before that, I would not have called myself a Christian. But reading what Jesus said about protecting the most vulnerable among us, about loving your neighbor as yourself, about forgiveness, about telling people that the good news is literally just that God created you, he knows you, he wants you to feel his love. That to me is the gospel. God literally just wants me to go out and tell people, I love you, I care for you. What can I do for you? We're supposed to be a servant. I feel like that has been completely co-opted by this group of people that are almost like the Taliban. Probably what most Muslims feel, that you have taken my faith and you have perverted it to do exactly the opposite of what my God tells me to do. The God of Matthew that preached the Sermon on the Mount about tolerance and love and blessed are the poor, and has been co-opted by billionaires to oppress and strip rights from the very people that Jesus came here to tell God loves you. So that is all. I'm glad you brought that up, Becky. I want to clarify in case as we go forward, I mentioned being a Christian again. That's what being Christian means to me.
Same.
We can move on from that. But, I want to go back to Mohan, though. I loved her. She was amazing in this. Oh, you said we're going to cover that in chart notes.
Yeah, that's chart notes.
Okay, good deal.
So the next up is Dr. McKay, and this woman is incredible. I feel like she's an angel.
I love this storyline.
Imperfect, but she's just, you want to talk about what I think
No, I think, you know what? That's a great point, Becky. I hadn't thought about it, but when I try to explain what I think of as Christian values,
that's her.
That is her.
Yeah.
She is not judging that woman. She is not over speaking her. She's listening. She's being empathetic. She's sharing her own most vulnerable points so that this woman can feel respected and loved, because that's what she needs more than anything.
That's all that woman needs right now.
Yeah.
Put it as she needs a hug and someone to look at her and say, you're not bad. What you're going through is bad. I think that woman needed to hear from someone who had experienced some level of what this woman is going through.
Yeah, that you're not your mistake, and that you're not your worst time. You're not your worst moment. That's why I went through that whole long diatribe about me finding Jesus in my worst moment, is that's what I want to be for other people. Is like McKay, she is a saint, and I try, but I don't have that much patience. And if people think of Christianity or me being an example of Christianity, that's what I want them to see, is that kind of heart and spirit. And I think she was the epitome of that.
Yeah. And she knew just the right balance, the difference in oversharing and sharing just enough to make Sherry comfortable and safe and to trust her, and watching her, she's got this way of smiling through an uncomfortable situation, but not smiling as if I'm making light of your plight, but smiling as if I hear you and it will be okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I was so mad when Javati bust in and started talking without asking a single question. And she didn't even acknowledge the patient. She's like, did Kiara come here? And then Sherry's like, wait, what? And all that work McKay put in, Javati just came in and steamrolled. I thought that conversation between McKay and Javati was really well done, and how McKay educated Javati on what she did wrong and why that patient probably won't come back. But unfortunately, and that's a very powerful line, there will be many more. And then she calls Javati out for judging her. But did you notice that in that bigger parts of that conversation, she didn't say you to Javati. She said we, as in this is how we become better doctors. I remember from being a trainer many, many years ago how important they instilled on us that it's not you or I, it's we. And again, talking about the camaraderie and the way these seniors rally around their students, that was a big learning moment for Javati. And then when Javati was like, I'm not judging, and McKay is just like, no, you are. You've been judging me since you saw this ankle bracelet.
Yeah.
And that's not going to get us anywhere. That's not how we're going to be good people, good doctors. I just thought that was such a great delivery. And, she ends it with, I'm not reprimanding you. I'm just telling you this is how it is. And this is what we have to do to be better doctors.
Yeah, that was, again, really showed the compassion that character has for everyone. And that obviously, through what she shared with her patient about her own backstory, about, losing primary custody of her child, wearing the ankle monitor, whatever that whole scenario is, where we have to assume she's sharing custody with her abuser, with her child, and they seem to have primary custody because she's mentioned in the past that she was in an abusive relationship. You could see on that actress's face that she was angry. Like her first initial reaction was anger. But even with that, she pulled back to make sure that Javati heard the lesson and not the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
She pulled back to make sure that she understood, that she was as frank with her as she could be, but that she understood, like you said, that you're not alone, that this is part of growing as a doctor and as a human. And this is just a teachable moment. Take this and run with it, because you're going to see this over and over and over again. And it kind of was like, this was what I was trying to say with Javati last week when we were talking about her talking with the trans woman. I think all of Javati's intentions are good, but that's a lesson I know, me personally, I've had to learn in life, is that it doesn't matter how right you are or how good your intentions are. If you come from a place of superiority or judgment, or as if you're setting yourself up as better, or if that's even the perception, even if that's not what you meant, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. It's how they're perceived, especially if you're a doctor.
Yeah. Well, we do learn about McKay that she's an addict, a recovering addict, and has been sober for 9 years. I wholeheartedly applaud that. She gets to see her kid, like you said, every other weekend, and will end up getting joint custody once the ankle bracelet comes off, which apparently is going to be very soon. So I hope we get more of that backstory once the ankle bracelet comes off. It was a great interaction. I learned something from her words, and I'm glad that she was fleshed out a little bit more, and we got a little bit more information about her story. So I thought that was a good section.
I want to just also commend the actress that plays Javati, because she's doing a fantastic job with little dialogue, really.
Yeah.
Of relaying this girl's depth, being completely out of her depth, or the feeling that she's got that deer in a headlight stare down to an art, but you also can see behind her eyes that she's processing it and she's taking everything in. She's trying to do better.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of naivety, not ugliness or bigotry.
Yeah. She's 20. She obviously has lived a very sheltered life with her, super powerful parents. And she probably, I'm not saying she hasn't worked for everything she has, but she probably has not had to deal with 80% of the situations that she's saying walk through this ER. And I think the moral of this whole episode was about is they're all learning and there is room for growth and you don't know what's coming, but you have to learn to deal with not only the patients that you're seeing, but with the people that surround you on a regular basis. And I think she's got the longest way to go because a lot of these other students have seen real world stuff and it's becoming more clear each episode that she has not. And I am very interested to see, again, if this is what she thinks being a doctor is for her. And if she does, how is she going to grow into being the doctor that I hope she can be?
One of the things I thought Wendy said for last week's episode was that very likely if she was an academically advanced kid who graduated significantly earlier than her peers, she probably has never been anything. She's never really had anything like a normal peer group. And she's always been kind of an outlier and outside. She probably didn't have much of a social life. She's probably has a very small circle, if any, real friends. So she's just kind of a fish out of water. But that makes me see that character really differently. This week, I thought about that a lot as we were watching her, and I have a lot more empathy for her and her reactions to things.
Yeah. Next, before we move into chart notes, I want to start this section by saying we finally get confirmation that Collins and Robbie boned.
Yes.
Made us wait till episode 5, but we got it. And she blew it off when Dana was talking to her about it. I love the Jane Austen reference.
That was funny.
That she's like, oh, it was a million years ago and it's not that big of a deal, which means it was recent. And it is a big deal.
Well, I want to mention, I'm glad you brought up her interaction with Dana. That was one of the moments I really liked. It might be in your chart notes. I don't know that through this episode was Dana offering her to go get her a grilled cheese.
Yeah.
So that she could, because she knew that she probably needed something in her stomach. In pregnancy, if you don't eat very often, you could get really sick or off kilter. I thought that was a really nice moment in there. I like their friendship.
I do too. So we were correct that Abbott did alter the numbers on the ultrasound so that the girl could get an abortion. Like you had a hard time last week or week before articulating what you felt about that whole episode. I'm just going to read my notes and then we can discuss it if you have anything to add. I think this was the most interesting storyline of the episode because we are seeing Robbie walk a very fine line between morals and ethics. The Dr. Collins argument was very strong, and I am grateful that we got to see a strong Black woman, that her future is at risk. His is cemented, but if she makes this choice, and one she seems not to be totally on board with, that it could cost her her career. And she points out the risks aren't the same for the two of them. And I thought this spoke volumes, especially given what has happened over the last week. It's not only about her job, but for women as a whole. Things are, we just talked about it earlier with the men, the woman bearing the brunt of dealing with an abortion when it took, a man was involved, but it's always the woman's the bad person or whatever, for whatever choice she chooses to make. And I'm glad they pointed that out. And I am glad that he acknowledged that he heard everything that she said.
Yes.
So before we move on to the rest of that, do you have anything you want to add to that particular moment?
I thought a lot about what I wanted to say and what I didn't want to say. I didn't come to any real conclusions about it, but it's tricky. It's very layered. I think they're doing a good job of telling this story and pointing out all of the different complexities of a situation like that. I still consider myself a pro-life person in that I believe in the dignity and sanctity of human life completely. That being said, I, as you know, have changed very much in my opinion about how much government should be involved in that situation. Because back when I would have told you that I believe abortion should be illegal in every situation that wasn't a medical emergency for the mother or didn't involve incest and rape. What I never envisioned, I was breathlessly naive. What I never envisioned was a world where these choices were not being made by doctors and patients. They were being made by men like our current president and the people that support him. And I didn't envision a world where men would seriously be talking about taking away the right for a woman to do that in any situation. There are some of these people that talk about taking away our right to vote. I mean, it is a real concentrated, actual happening war on women that is not hyperbole. That's not even really debatable.
Fact. It's what's happening.
They're
and
not
it's
even
just
subtle
women.
about it.
It's people of color.
Mm-hmm.
It's the LGBTQ plus community. Based on what the facts, what is happening, there's a solid chance. And I said this the other day, the only people safe in this country right now are straight, white, predominantly rich white men. I mean, that's just facts.
Yeah.
You look at him trying to take away MLK Day, Pride Day, to suspend all of those things. Anyway, back to your point. I'm sorry. I will not go off on a rant right now.
No, that's exactly my point. Is it's scary and it's horrifying and it's really happening. When I heard them discussing the fetal age of that baby, it was hard, honestly, but I'll be very honest. It was hard to hear him discuss that this fetus already had a head and a butt and it was that far along. You know, I've been pregnant twice. I know that at that stage of development, there is a strong heartbeat. It was really hard for me to hear them discuss it like that and know that his entire intent was to lie about how far along that fetus was in order to get this girl a medical abortion. But it's just, it's complex. And, you know, whereas Mandy from 6, 7, 8 years ago might have been outraged and feel like they were simplifying this or glossing over, you know, what happens in a body. And when you are pregnant, the Mandy of now, if I had to pick, I would fall for letting that girl do what she wants to do at this point. And, you know, I don't know. It's an interesting storyline. I'm glad they're telling it, especially in the light of the fact that, as I mentioned, doctors are starting to be women. This is, again, something I never envisioned is actually criminalizing women who choose to have an abortion.
Well, here's another thing that irks me. Imagine this girl, and I hope they do this before the 15 hours is up, because I am obsessed with how they're bringing, I say it every episode, bringing current world, real world situations into this medical drama and handling them. And Wendy backed it up. It's real. The way they're doing this is real and it's right. And I really appreciate that about this show. I was adopted and I am very grateful that she birthed me and she didn't have to. And I appreciate that. So I guess I am pro-choice. I do think there should be some limitations set just to make sure we don't go off the rails. But I heard a story and I cried when I heard this. A woman in Texas, and it's not the first one, but it's the first one that I'd heard. A woman in Texas died because she was having a miscarriage, but because of the law, the doctors were afraid to treat her. And she died.
There was a woman in Georgia, too.
So you're telling me that you're not pro-life. These people doing this are not pro-life. They're pro-birth.
Right.
They give zero shits what happens to that kid or the mother once it's born.
Right. It's just about regulating women's sexuality in healthcare. And that is, I used to think that proponents of abortion on demand who framed it as women's health care, I used to think that they were being disingenuous. I was so naive. I never believed we would be in a world where we would talk about holding women legally responsible for having an abortion, about arresting doctors and women, is something else that really changed. The way that I used to approach my thought about that issue very much came from the fact that I was a child that, by all intents and purposes, should have been aborted. You know, my father left before I was born. My mother was a teenager. She had just graduated from high school 3 months before she got pregnant with me. I have been grateful every day, no matter what happened in my life, no matter how bad things were, that my mother made the choice to keep me, even though that must have been very, very hard for her. And we were, again, very poor. Like all of the arguments that a lot of people usually give for, you know, why it would be better off for some women to have an abortion, poverty, things like that. It always felt insulting to me because I was the poster child of all of those things that they said these children would have to endure. And yet I was still very grateful for my life. But then I had a daughter, and I had to start thinking outside of just my circumstances to what would I do if my 12-year-old were raped and her body is not even ready to have a child, you know? And that really is part of when, and all of that, and my daughter's coming of age there really started to coincide with this current scary era of politics that we're in. And it really helped me to understand how naive I had been in my thinking of that issue. It is just not black and white. Like, that's why I love that they're telling this storyline. And I don't think it's an accident that Collins is being brought into this discussion when she's pregnant.
I think that was very intentional.
I'm excited to see what her further thinking is on this from the perspective of a woman who is currently carrying a child.
Yeah. So we talked about it last week with Wendy. There's something odd about the mother and daughter. I think you mentioned you thought it was the mom who really wanted the medication. Well, we find out why there was something weird.
Yeah.
Because that was not her mom. That's her aunt.
Yeah.
And her mom obviously is not for this. And I think that brings up a whole different conversation, and it makes for a very great cliffhanger, because I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Like, I hope that they're really going to, it is just like the far right has hijacked this issue, and they have tried to make it black and white, that this is always a choice of you are killing a baby, and that is the fundamental end of the day. There is absolutely never a justification for that. And I hope that they really dive into how incredibly complex this issue is and why it is abhorrent to have this one-size-fits-all solution for something that happens to so many women in this country and girls in this country. I hope they really dive into maybe the moral ambiguities that Collins may be having. I hope they don't make the mother a cartoon villain. I hope she shows some growth, or at least is given the chance to expand on what her thinking is, and that it's not just some kind of cartoonishly evil, stance against abortion, even if it's bad for her daughter. I'm definitely on the edge of my seat. I want to see where they're going with this. And
given that they pick up the next episode with where they ended, I think we're going to get to dive right into that. And I can't wait.
Yeah.
Unless you've got anything else to add, we can move on to chart notes.
Nope, I think I'm good.
Earl was my MVP this week. Earl is the patient that keeps wandering into the waiting room looking for his sandwich, but don't give him an egg salad sandwich. And his comment to the hateful waiting guy when he says they took me back there to stick a GD thermometer in my mouth, and Earl's like, repeat vitals every 4 hours.
Yeah, Earl's a regular.
That was just so cute. Ginger, the elderly woman who fell, was adorable.
Aww.
I loved how sweet Dr. Robbie was with his interactions with her. I felt the daughter's pain in my soul.
For sure.
I'm glad this wasn't a situation where a resentful child is dealing with a resentful mother, where the mother acknowledged, this girl loves me and I feel bad. I hope she comes back for her mom, and I think she will. I hope she just gets to go home and take like a 24-hour nap, knowing that mom's in a safe place. And get some rest. And I hope they are able to, Dr. King is able to use her own experiences and knowledge to help her find help so that they both can go on and live. That's just again, I really wish Wendy could have been on for this one. I would have loved to have heard her.
We need to have her every week because there
I
were a lot of things I was
wish.
wondering about. That was great. I loved that. I'm glad you brought that up because that storyline was so sweet. One, I think that little lady and Mona need to get together. Is it Mona or Myrna?
Myrna.
Myrna, who, by the way, we find out is chained to her.
That's my next chart note.
I think they should get together and have a buddy comedy. I would watch that all day
I would
long.
watch that. And Earl.
Yeah, Earl, Myrna, and that little lady. That what was her name again? The little lady.
Ginger.
They love how her and Myrna are both very flirty,
Next time, buy me dinner before you do that.
like an ER Golden Girls mashup.
Yes.
But I thought that show was another point where they showed how some of these residents are very knowledgeable. Like we saw how competent she was in that one scene. Dr. King was in that one scene where she came in and saved Whitaker's bacon. But here you see where she is telling this woman, hey, just hire an in-home health nurse like I did. And it didn't even occur to her. That's not something that everybody can afford to do, or even the vast majority of people can afford to do.
Yeah, and I don't think King went in.
She wasn't trying to be.
No, not at all. It's again, I think it's her matter of fact
It's a
approach
teachable
to
moment.
things. And when that scene was almost over and she's like, I just told her to take a break. I didn't mean for this to happen.
Right.
She's good. And I believe she did it earlier on in the shift. She helped get some information together to help somebody. So
Yeah.
I do believe she's going to come through. And but I do think she is going to have to continue to learn how to approach a situation, not with just such a clinical mind, but with an emotional part too. She's got to learn that side of it. But I love that. So my next chart note is Myrna, want a pony ride, big boy? And Dana telling Whitaker she's harmless. Whitaker, she's in handcuffs. And Dana so calmly, that's why she's harmless.
Did you see Dana? Like when what was it? When Ginger's daughter was saying, she came by and said, did you have a red Camry parked in the ambulance bay? It needs to be moved. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just wasn't sure where to go. And she just goes, okay.
Why are you telling me this?
Yeah, like I don't care. I was just telling you that it had to be moved. Yeah, Dana's funny.
Really like Dana.
She's kind of a mom figure, a maternal figure in the ward, but she's the mom like I'm a mom. She's
she's us, yeah.
She's going to be there to pick you up and help you wipe your nose, but then she's going to tell you why you screwed that up and should have done, pick yourself up, suck it up, and move on. She's not a babyer.
So 2 more sets of scrubs, bite the dust. I noticed when he went to put his card in and ended up with the blue scrubs that he only has so much left on his card. I think he might be walking around in some strategically taped together hospital gowns before this shift is over. And F you to Trinity for again calling him Huckleberry and then making fun of the fact that I guess blue scrubs are nurses and then being dicky like, oh, you got demoted. No, nurses are good.
He is going to get that fall from that high horse. I think is going to be.
I look forward to that fall. Next up is the sickle cell storyline. I thought it was heartbreaking watching her have to be intubated. I know you'll have more to add, but my notes real quick. I just look forward to Mohan finding that right balance, being with her patients. I love how Dr. Collins told her to keep doing you, Mohan, and apologize to her for the nickname.
That was very sweet. What I was going to say, though, before we move on from the Scrubs thing, is that it very much reminds me of when I used to work at the restaurant that we used to work for when I would work.
Aprons.
You know what a pig I am anyway. I'm not very tidy. I'm kind of like if I wear something white, it is immediately going, like I could be in a pristine bubble and somehow mustard would jump into the bubble and get on my clothes. So
same.
I sometimes would have to change my shirt 2 or 3 times if I was working a double, and still by the end of the night I looked like I had just dumped a thing of honey mustard all over me. So that I was feeling some empathy for Whitaker with that.
Run him through
a car wash.
He needs to be the 3-compartment sink. He needs to be washed, he needs to be rinsed, and then he needs to be sanitized.
Yeah, and then just stick him back out
I'm
there.
worried he's got at least 5 new diseases for every pair of scrubs he's lost. Something, and it's always on his face.
He needs to be tested for everything in the world before the end of the shift. But anyway, moving on.
Is there anything else you want to say about the sickle cell?
Yes, I just want to talk about how beautiful that relationship was, how sweet. I just love Mohan's interaction with those women.
And I love the women, that love that they feel.
Yeah, they're just such a good, sweet little couple. And I loved how Mohan told them that, she absolutely didn't mind their displays of affection, that she didn't get to see a loving marriage like that when she was growing up because her dad passed away. I love that we found out that she's doing that study.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That explained a lot more about her character.
And why she's staying with certain patients for such longer periods of time.
Yeah, it really explains a lot. I do think we need that. I honestly think, though, it may turn out that she finds that she is more, I don't know. I went back and forth with this because I thought for a minute, maybe what Mohan's journey is going to be that she finds out that she really is better off in a specialty. But then I started thinking we need people like that in ERs too. Like she got 2 very different messages from Collins and from Robbie this week. One, Robbie telling her, we gotta save this woman's life. You gotta stop trying to be your friend.
Which he was right. That was not the time to drag her heels. The time to drag her heels was once the intubation happened and she stayed to make sure that the spouse was comfortable and fully understood everything that was going on. That's why I said earlier, I think her arc is going to be her finding that balance between being the doctor who has to make certain choices quickly and then balancing when there's time to be the nurturer that she wants to be for her patients. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be her arc.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, because again, I thought maybe she would discover that, but then I started really thinking because there is such prevalence of people of color receiving inadequate health care and not being listened to, it's absolutely crucial that we have more people like that in emergency situations, especially so that they can be advocated for. But she definitely got 2 different messages. Like Collins didn't equivocate. She just said, don't listen to Robbie. You are doing exactly what you should be doing, and you're doing it the right way. You doctor the way that you want to doctor. I agree with you.
Keep in mind, Collins wasn't there when this woman was about to crash. So, and she needed to, time wasn't what they needed. She needed to get that consent form done. I think if Collins had seen that, her message would have still been, you do you, don't let you go, but know when there are times that you have to go.
I don't know that, Becky, because here's what I'm thinking is that the reason that it showed them, those 2 individuals specifically giving her 2 very different messages is because, and you may be right, like if they had written the scene so that she was there for that, but I think that they deliberately chose to show Mohan getting 2 very different messages to them because it further illustrates how these 2 characters, Collins and Robbie, obviously have some attraction to each other and a lot of respect and love, but essentially they are 2 very different people when it comes to some of their ethic and some of the ways that they see medicine.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think that she needed to hear both of the messages.
For sure.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Again, I know we've talked about this before, that sometimes I think they're throwing out red herrings here where they just want us to think it's going to go a certain way and it goes another. And also, before we move on from them, I want to say that I love the wife's name, Ondine. I thought that was so pretty.
That is a pretty name.
Yeah. I don't know why that stuck out, but I really like that. That was beautiful.
Last chart note was disgusting watching poor Whitaker try to get the head and neck people to come down and look at this kid who's bleeding to death, basically. And they wouldn't do it. They didn't want to do it because the surgery was done at a different hospital.
Oh.
That is just another problem in our healthcare system. And it just really pissed me off. But I loved Whitaker's, like, what am I supposed to do? Put him in an Uber?
Right.
And then at the end, after,
After he
Whitaker
saved him.
helped and got his got confidence back, and he's like, so I guess it's okay when the head net guy does finally come down, and Whitaker's like, so I guess I can cancel the Uber, and the little grin on Robbie's face, it was just like his
That
little
was like,
boy is growing up. Yeah,
yeah.
it was, I loved it.
His little high five moment. That is my nightmare. The only thing I really have to say about that entire storyline is, as a parent, that terrifies me. My kids have had drainage issues when they were kids, and about the time that Ava was small and I think Jackson had just had tubes put in, and she never had to have tubes, but they were talking about potentially removing her tonsils at one point. And this little girl in our community named Ava, who was the same age, died from that very issue. Something went, just some minor nick, or it may have been the exact same thing, that the sutures came out and she started bleeding and she died. There's a little water feature at our park here, like a little play splash pad named for her. And that's always stuck with me. And just within the last month, Ava has started talking about, my daughter Ava has started talking about wanting to get her tonsils removed because she keeps getting these throat infections, and that is my nightmare. I'm only even pointing that out because I don't think if she listens, she's gonna listen to this, because I don't want to freak her out even more. But it's really scary. I mean, even routine surgeries like that can go bad, and it's really frightening.
Yeah. Well, anything else that you want to discuss about the points or chart notes in the episode?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, my final thoughts are pretty much my early thoughts. I just think this episode did a great job highlighting the supporting cast, taking a step back from Dr. Robbie being the primary focus, giving us a chance to see more of the med students and their teachers as they handle some interesting cases. The writers, once again, have brought more real world issues into the forefront, and I am so curious to see where they go with what they got.
Yeah, same. We're really getting into it. This is the third of the way through officially after this last episode. So I think the next 5 episodes are going to be really meaty. Ew, gross. I don't really even like using that phrase. Yeah.
Y'all, she yelled at me in episode 1 or 2 for saying before we get to the meat of the episode. So
and
I feel
just did it
vindicated.
again. Ugh, gross. I wish I hadn't said it. But yeah, no, loving it so far. Really good, really good episode.
Well, I am excited that we got a little bit of feedback. Mandy, do you want to share it?
Yep. Anita on Facebook said, okay, so Whitaker is on his 5th pair of scrubs now. So I guess that's our answer. Yeah.
Yes. I responded to them on Facebook and was made a joke. And she did respond back saying that if that were her, all the experiences, she would have been catatonic by now. Like, I think I agree with you. So thank you, Anita, for writing in. And also, I noticed that Anita did share our podcast information on her page, and we greatly appreciate the support. And I do also want to give a shout out to the Pitt fan page. Am I getting that right?
Mm-hmm.
Mandy introduced them to us, and they've acknowledged our existence, and we're getting some new followers from them. So thank you and hello to the Pitt fan page. Check them out on Facebook. If you would like to leave us feedback, say hi, or I don't know, or if you've got any thoughts on anything that we talk about, if it's things that aren't fully related to the show, or just, we'd love to hear from you guys. So, please email or send us a voice message as an attachment to What's On Tonight 2 at gmail.com. And that's What's On Tonight and the number 2 at gmail.com. You can visit our Facebook page where there will be a post for the next episode. And there you can leave feedback in the comment section like Anita did, or you can send us a message through Facebook Messenger. We can also be found on Instagram at What's On Tonight Podcast and the number 2. We would greatly appreciate it if you'd leave a review, comment, like, and or share on your podcast listening app of choice. So let's head on over to the doctor's lounge for a break, and let's talk podcast recommendations and anything else we might want to share. What do you got, Mandy?
I'm yet again, I don't really listen to as many podcasts as you do, but I will say that if you are struggling with any kind of internal rage at the rollback of women's rights of this country, listening to the Snapped podcast can be very therapeutic.
I could see that.
Leave it at that. I won't go any further into it.
I feel you. I can be heard on Adrenaline Cinema podcast, Panels to Pixels podcast, and here on What's On Tonight podcast. We did record on Adrenaline Cinema the first 3 episodes of the Mayfair Witches. So I think that's going to be coming out soon. So please give that a listen. As far as podcast recommendations, I don't know anything about this, but it seems to be quite popular. So I wanted to let you guys know that Panels to Pixels, in collaboration with Adrenaline Cinema podcast, just released their coverage of, and I don't know if I'm going to say this right, manga, the manga adaptation of Ricky O, the story of Ricky from 1991. Apparently a good listen. So if you're into that comic, please go check that out. And I stayed up later than I've stayed up in years last night because I started watching the Hulu show Paradise, starring Sterling K. Brown. I don't want to say too much and give anything away, but if you are looking for a show to watch once you finish this week's episode of The Pitt, I highly recommend going to Hulu and checking out Paradise. It kept me up till midnight because it was so good. And not even podcast related, I just want to say that we are extending a big virtual hug to anyone out there who needs one. Things are really crazy and messed up right now. So please make sure to take mental health breaks. And to quote the great Buffy Summers from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'm taking a holiday from dealing, happily vacationing in the land of not coping. Sometimes it is okay to do that.
I think it's imperative to do that. And I'm going to jump back one more second because I want to reiterate that I agree with Becky. We are out here not just giving you a big virtual hug. We are advocating. If you are somebody that is from a marginalized community that feels powerless or hopeless, or even somebody who is a fellow advocate that feels alone, especially like Becky and I, you are a tiny, tiny blue dot in a huge sea of red. You're not alone.
Not at all.
It is okay to take a break. Pete Buttigieg had a really good quote that I think I talked to you about, Becky, back in December when he said, I think we need to move quickly past the shock of all of the things that are happening and jump straight into how do we help? And I say that to remind people who are scared and afraid, that are part of these marginalized communities that are the most likely to be affected. This middle class, cis het white woman is out here still I am using my privilege every way that I can think of to try to advocate for the people in my life that I love that are struggling mightily right now. So I want to not only encourage the people that are struggling to take care of themselves, the people that are in fear and all of that, to take a beat when you need to, all of us, but also to anybody out there who does have privilege, who is wanting to be on the right side of history, to please keep reminding the people in your life that we are not powerless, that they are not alone, and that we are still out here working for them. And there are millions of people just like us. Even though it can feel very overwhelming, there's millions and millions and millions of us. And if we keep fighting, I firmly believe we can turn this tide back at some point. We can't give up.
Absolutely. Want to give a big thank you to Mark and Powercore Entertainment for giving us this platform and for everything you do. Please visit the Power Corp's website. It can be found on our Facebook page, and there you can find our podcast, as well as other podcasts like the Slay Lounge podcast with Billy and Will. And you can also find other projects that Mark is working on. Check it out.
That wraps up our coverage of episode 5 of The Pitt. We'll be back next week where we're going to break down episode 6 titled 12 p.m.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I'm Becky.
And I'm Mandy.
We'll catch you next week when we grab the remote and see what's on tonight. Bye. I can't wait to get into the meat of next week's episode.